Okay, so now we're going to talk about generics. And first, I'm going to still use the same project than before. Going to just delete everything on the app.ts, and I'm just going to start over. Just going to leave everything as it is, so we don't have to create a new project. So I just got to be honest to you. I'm not sure that this is going to be something that you're going to use the whole time. I'm talking about generics. And it's because your code will work perfectly by just not using it. Now, this is one more tool we get from TypeScript to make our code a little bit more consistent and reusable, and that's the key word with the generics. It's reusable. And again, this is going to be something you may or may not use, but you need to know at least what it is, and you need to recognize it on the code because it's going to use a very specific notation. So if you maybe in the future you're gonna check someone else's code, you're gonna see a generic function, and you're not gonna know what it is. It's gonna look pretty weird. So of course I'm not gonna be very creative right here. I'm just gonna use some of the examples we get on the docs. Okay, so I'm gonna go right here, and I'm just gonna create a function that takes an argument and then prints something. We're gonna start really simple. So I'm gonna create a function again. And I'm going to call it print and then size. You could put whatever name. So this one, it will take an argument called data, and the type of this one is going to be any. And I know that I'm putting any, and this is actually on purpose. And now I'm getting this correction. Data is declared and values never read. That's okay. We're going to do console log, and then we're going to do data, and I'm going to call the length, just like this. Oh. There we go. I'm just going to call the length, all right? This is just a function. It's going to receive that argument, and then it's going to give us, it will give us the length of that argument. Pretty simple. So now I'm going to say print size, and I'm going to pass the keyword Francis. That's it. That's the only thing we're going to do. I'm going to run the TSC and the minus watch, so we don't have to compile it, each time we make a change. And if we go to the code, we get 7. So this is what it's doing. It's giving us the amount of characters we get on this string. Now, what happens if I do an array? I'm going to go pretty much the same thing. Just going to copy this so I don't have to type it again. So I'm still going to do Francis, but this time I'm going to be passing an array. So the first one is going to be R, and the other one is going to be A, array. All right. So now if we go again to the code, we get 2. It's giving us, it's returning, doing a console log of the length of the array, pretty simple. All right, I know this is dumb, don't worry, it will make sense in a minute. So I'm going to do print size again, but this time I'm going to be passing a number. And notice we get no errors, right? So if we go here, we get undefined. And this is normal. We don't have the ability with JavaScript, I'm not talking about TypeScript, with JavaScript to check the length of a number, which it's not allowed. We don't have the ability with JavaScript, and that's why we get undefined. So the problem is right now that maybe someone else, maybe a developer, some other developer, will run this function you created, and it will pass a number by mistake, and it's going to be expecting for a return of some sorts, and it will get undefined, and this might break your code, and could be a problem. So to solve this kind of things where we pass different things to a function and we expect different types of arguments, we get generics. So let's make this function a generic function, and it's going to look a little bit weird at the beginning. Now remember that whenever we put any, we are pretty much saying we are asking TypeScript not to check anything, and that's why we don't get an error, because it's not checking. We are expecting any kind of data right here. So to make this function a generic function, we need to do something like this. We need to put the open and close. We need to put an ID, and this could be whatever you want. In this case, I'm just going to put T, because on the examples on the documentation, you get a letter T. So I'll pretty much do the same thing. Now on the data, instead of putting anything, I'm going to put that T. And notice that the error goes away. All right. Now we get a different error. And this is now a generic function. So now we get a different error saying that the property length does not exist on type T. So, it's kind of letting us know that we cannot use a number to check the length. Pretty clever. If I comment this out, if I do something like this, we are kind of still getting the same error message. So this is what it's doing behind the scenes. This is a generic function. So since this is a generic function, it means that we are going to reuse this function several times. Okay. Since we might pass an argument, this argument could be whatever. Could be a string, could be a number, could be an array, could be whatever value that we pass. So just beforehand, TypeScript, it's checking the code that you have right here, and it's saying, oh, okay, so since this function might receive any kind of data, a strings number, with numbers, I cannot do length. So it's just instantly giving us an error message. Since this could be a string, it's going to pass. But since this could be a number, this is not going to pass. So, it's giving us an error message. So again, TypeScript, what we do with a generic function, it's adding, one more additional check to what we do, with the function. So right now we are saying that we are going to receive this function as an argument, any type, right? It could be strings, could be numbers, could be an array, whatever. So we get the length. Now, what we can do something like this. We are pretty much saying that on this generic function, we are expecting an argument, and that argument should be an array with, any kind of types. Could be an array with numbers, an array with Booleans, any kind of array. But it needs to be an array. Now, since we know that with arrays, we can check the length, we don't get the error right here. We are getting the error on the Francis because we are passing a string. It's pretty smart. If I do it on the number, we get the error on the number, and we are not getting it on the array. Pretty cool stuff. Now remember that this T could be whatever you want. Could be Francis, doesn't matter. If we do pretty much the same thing right here, the error will go away. So this is kind of an ID that we need to assign to the generic class, to the generic function. So, okay, so let me show you just one more thing. We can pretty much apply this logic, but backwards. So I'm going to go right here, and instead of doing a console log, I'm just going to return, let me do it correctly. I'm just going to return whatever data we get right here. And I'm going to remove the array from the argument. So we are just returning some data. Since this data could be whatever, notice that we get no errors because we are just returning some data. We are not doing anything. Okay, so if I go right here and say that I want to console log, or maybe run this function, and I'm going to do it on a console log so we can see the error message. I'm going to say that I want to console log whatever we get back from this function, that it's returning whatever we pass as an argument. Now, if I want to do dot and I want to check the length, we can do it. We are allowed to do this because we can access length with strings. So if I comment this out and I save it and go to our code, we get 7. Pretty much the same example than before, but just backwards. So I'm going to do the same thing with the array. So I'm going to do array. I'm going to copy paste so I don't have to type everything. And I'm going to do dot and then length. And of course, we get 2. So, that works. So what happens with the print number? We know now that we cannot do length on numbers. All right, so I'm going to copy this one again so I don't have to type it again. And I'm going to do a number, and we get an error. Right? So this works backwards. If you're getting an error right here because you made a mistake inside of the function, you get the error on the actual function. If you're making an error whenever you trigger that function, you get the error right here. So again, generic functions generics are pretty smart. Okay, so let me just show you one more thing. If I go right here, if I hover on this one, notice that we get function, print size, and we are getting an annotation for this one. So inference is kind of kicking in right here. So we get since we get inference, we have the ability to add an annotation to this. We can do it manually. Right now, we are getting it by default. So we can do it manually. If on this one I'm passing a string, I'm going to say that this one will be a string just like this. And if we do array, again, this one is going to be a string because we want to return a string, but with an array, right? And if this one we want to do number, we're going to do number and put it like this. So again, this one is not going to work. So we're going to leave it just like it is because we cannot do it. And now the code works. We don't get undefined. Okay, so there's a little bit more logic to generics. So let's go to the next one and talk about that. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example, just to show you what you could do with generics, why sometimes could be very useful. So I'm going to delete everything and just going to create two different functions. We need to print some cars and we need to print some prices. Pretty simple. So I'm gonna just create a function. I'm gonna say function, and on this one we're gonna say print cars because we are gonna be printing cars, car brands. So as an argument, when we trigger this function, we're gonna accept an array with the brands, right? So I'm gonna say cars, and we are gonna be expecting a string with an array. Now this function, what it's going to do for now, is going to do void because we are just going to do a console log. All right. So now what we need to do, we need to graph cars and we need to loop it because we are going to receive an array. So what we want to do, we want to loop the cars and then do a simple console log of, pretty much the car, which is the brand that we're going to be passing. So later we're going to do print car. Actually, I'm going to do print cars. Print cars, we're going to open and close, and I'm going to be passing an array. And just the brands, Ferrari, I don't know, BMW, something like that. Why not? Why not? What else? Another brand, I don't know, Fiat or something like that. And that's it. With 3, it's okay. I'm guessing you get the point. So of course, if we go to the application, we get the brands. So now what I want to do, I want to create a different function that is going to be printing some prices. So I'm going to do function again, and I'm going to say print and then prices. Open and close, same idea. So this one will get prices. This is going to be a number and an array. And notice that this one we get strings, and in this one we get numbers. So I'm going to do void. And I'm going to go right here at the bottom, and I'm going to just loop the prices. So prices, we're going to do a for each. I'm going to go and say price, and then we're going to do the same thing at the top. We are going to do just a console log and console log the price. All right, pretty simple. So now I'm going to go to print prices, I'm going to open and close, and pass an array of numbers. I don't know, 200, maybe 100, and I don't know, 50. There we go. So of course we get the numbers, right? Again, this is pretty dumb, I know, and I'm not teaching you anything. So of course this both functions are pretty much identical. They are pretty much the same function. The only difference is that the argument has a different type. So for this one, we could, create one generic function that is going to serve both types, an array with strings and an array with numbers. And we just kind of simplify everything to a single function. Okay, so let's do it. So I'm going to go right here on the top, and I'm going to say, okay, now we're going to create a function, but this one, instead of printing something very specific, we're going to print all. Again, this is called generic functions, so this has to be generic. So right now, I'm going to just open and close, and I'm going to say that this one is going to be a generic function. So I'm going to put it capital T. Remember that this could be, anything. And then, of course, we're going to receive an argument, and this one is going to be an array. And we're going to say that with this array, the type could be anything, a generic type. All right. So then, of course, we're going to do void, just like this, void. And then pretty much we kind of need to do pretty much the same thing with it right here. So I'm not going to type it again, but I'm going to change this because we get the array, and then we get the element, and then I'm going to say elements. All right. So notice we are just doing the same code, pretty much the same code, but the type is going to be a generic type. Could be string, could be a number. And TypeScript, it's already checking what we have right here, so we don't get an error. So of course now we don't do this anymore. We get one function. So I'm going to comment this out, and instead of saying printing cars, I'm going to say print all. So we have one function with a generic type to do pretty much the same job. So again, this is the main idea of generics. It's just to save a little bit of space and code. All right, so let's go to the next one, and I'm going to show you something else. Right now we are using generics with the functions. We can do it with classes as well. Okay, so since we can create generic functions, we can do generic classes. Now, I'm going to, again, teach you with an example, and we're going to use pretty much the same example we used right here. We're going to try to create a class that works with cars and a class that works with prices, and then we're going to try to create a generic class to kind of cover both scenarios. So I'm going to go and delete everything and start from the beginning. So first, we are going to get a class with cars. So I'm going to call it cars, of course. Now, when we create an instance of this class, we need to have some elements, the cars, the brands. So we need to use the constructor. Now, the constructor is going to use that public keyword we learned previously to create the elements. And this could be brands. I'm just going to put elements so we can reuse this function later, this class later. So we're going to, of course, receive some elements, and they're going to be strings, and it's going to be an array. All right, don't worry if you don't get it. You're gonna see it working in a second, and you're gonna get it. So then I'm gonna create a function, a method inside. It's gonna be called result, open and close. And on this one, I'm gonna do the index, and we are gonna get a number. A number. And this is the argument that we're gonna get when we trigger this function. Now, what we want to do, we want to return, in this case, the name of a car on a given index. Again, don't worry, it sounds confusing. You're going to see it in action in a second. So this function, when we call it, is going to be returning a string. And what it's going to do is going to return one of the brands that we're going to be passing. And we're going to be passing the index. So we need to return this. We're going to go to elements, and we're going to be passing that index that we are passing as an argument. So later, if we create a const of cars, and then we create a new instance of this class, we're going to say cars, and we know that we need to be passing some arguments, and that's why we get this error. So we're going to pass the same thing we did before. We're going to do Ferrari, then I don't know, Fiat, and then BMW. I believe that's correct. So okay, so now everything is cool. We are creating an instance of this class, and this class has the elements with these brands. So now what we can do, we can use cars, and actually we're going to need to do a console log so we can see it on the browser. We need to go to cars, and I want to trigger that function, that result. And this one knows, remember, that needs an index, which is going to be which position of the array we want to get. So in this case, if I say 0, we are pretty much saying that we want to print the first position of the array. In this case, it's going to be Ferrari, so that's what we get. And in this case, if it's going to be the number 1, we're going to get Fiat. All right, that's cool. Again, pretty simple function. Okay, so we want to do the same thing with prices. We have a different class that has pretty much the same thing. So we're going to do prices, and I'm not going to type it again because it's pretty much the same function. So I'm going to rename it. I'm going to say prices, and we still need a constructor. We still need an array of elements, an array with the prices, but this one is going to be a number. And then we still get the same method right here, and we are still going to accept a string, but on this one is going to be a number. Right, pretty cool. So now again, same idea. If we go at the bottom and we say const, and then we go to prices, I'm going to say new prices, and we need to be passing an array. So the array is going to be 100, then 200, and then, I don't know, 50. That's okay. And then, of course, we're going to do the same thing. Console log. We're going to go to prices, dot, we're going to do result, and we're going to say that we want to output the second position of the array, which is going to be 200. And again, we get 500, and it's because it's the first position of the array. All right, so we get 200. This one is the 0 position, first position, and then second position. All right, that's okay. We know that this works. There's nothing about generics right here. So now what I want to do, I want to create a generic class. So on this one, I'm going to use a much more global name. Since we are talking about cars and prices of cars, I'm going to call it vehicles. We could call it this, whatever you want. So I'm going to open and create a class. Now, since this is going to be a generic, we need to put the T right here. And remember that this one could be whatever you want. Could be cars, could be whatever. I'm using a T because if you go to the example on the documentation, you're going to get a T. They use a T for the example. All right, so this is going to be a generic class. Now, we still need to do the constructor, and again, I'm not going to type it again. And since we could be passing strings or numbers, we need to change this to a generic type. So I'm going to put generic. What else? We have that function. Okay, so that function I'm going to put right here. And again, we are saying that we want to work with strings. And again, this is going to be generic, so we cannot do it. We're going to use that T that we use at the top. And that's it, it's that easy. So I'm going to comment this out because now we are not going to use them anymore. And we're going to test if this works. Now, instead, we are using the class vehicles. So we are creating an instance of cars, not anymore, and not anymore, and everything is good. Everything is compiling and we get no errors. So if we go right here, we are still getting the value, so everything works. So notice how much space, how much code, how much lines we just simplified into maybe a couple lines. So generics, again, it's not something that you're going to use maybe the whole time, but it's something that you could use that could be very, very useful. All right, so before we move forward to the next topic, I want to show you one more thing with this, and then of course we just move forward. First, I'm going to delete this because it's just in the way. And what I'm going to do, and again, it's going to make sense in a minute. I'm going to create a const, one more const, and on this one, I'm going to add pretty much the same thing. We're going to still use this generic class, but with Booleans. So I'm going to call it bool, so it can make sense. And I'm going to create a new vehicle, just like we did before, and I'm going to be passing an array with Booleans. So we're going to do true, I'm going to do false, and I'm going to, do true again. Okay. So remember, we can specify right now inference is kicking in. So we can do string if we wanted to right here. And on this one, we could do number just like this. And on this one, of course, we could do Boolean. Okay, that's good. That's good. So I'm going to go at the bottom. And again, I'm going to do that console log. And I want to use that bool. I want to use that result. And I want to get the second position or the third position in this case. And we're going to get true because it's, the third position on the array. All right, that's cool. We know this works. Now, what is the problem right here? So we are using the same class because it's a generic class with three different things, with strings, numbers, and Booleans. And maybe, just maybe, in real life, what is going to happen is that you're going to create this generic class and you want to allow other developers to use this generic class only with strings and with numbers. Maybe you don't want to allow the developer to use it with Booleans. This class is not meant to be used with Booleans. So what you can use an additional tool you get with generics, and it's going to be called constraints. So what you can do, again, you can pass some rules right here at the top, and you can say, okay, so this generic class can only be used with strings and numbers and nothing else, and not with Booleans in this case. So to do this, to add constraints, what you will need to do is you need to make a space right here at the top, and you need to do extends, just like this. And then you will need to put, what you want to use on this generic class. So in this case, I'm going to allow strings. And as soon as I do so, notice that I get an error on number and booleans. So, we cannot use this generic class. So if I do pipe and I add number, just like this, we are allowed to use numbers and strings, but not booleans. And again, this is very useful if you want to kind of restrict or kind of block your generic class in some cases. Now, of course, you can use constraints, and let me just delete this so we can get rid of that error message. You can use it with functions. Right now, we are using on a class. Let's, just create a dump function and use constraints. I'm going to create a function called scream. This one is going to be just a function. We're going to do a void, and of course, we're going to receive an argument of text, and I'm going to set the value. We're going to do just a console log, nothing really big. And I'm just going to console log the argument. So this one is going to be a generic type, and on this one we need to do t. And of course, if later we do scream, just like this, and we scream hello, we should be getting that hello right here. So we get hello. Okay, that's good. So now, of course, I want to block it. Maybe I want to use the strings, and I want to allow I want to use this function maybe with numbers. So again, same idea. We do extends, and we say that we want to allow only numbers. So the string goes into the error state. Pretty cool stuff. So we're going to change it to strings. All right. Okay. And I want to show you one more thing. As we already talked about interfaces. So we can use interfaces along with generic classes and functions. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to reuse this function. I'm going to just go back and show you a simple example. You got an example on the documentation. It's a little bit confusing, so I'm just going to show you a simple example. What I'm going to do, I'm going to just, we get just a function. We are going to be passing an argument, but the argument is going to be an object. All right, so I'm going to go to scream, and on scream, we are going to be passing an object. So the object, we will have the text, the property text, and we're going to pass some strings. So I'm going to say, just hello. That's cool. And then I'm going to be passing a position. Doesn't matter right now. And this position is going to be a number. Okay. So now this function, it's receiving an argument, which is going to be an object. So later, of course, since you know that you're going to be getting an object, you want to maybe output something inside the object. Maybe you want to output the text. So in this case, I'm just going to go and change it to arg. So, it makes sense. I want to output the arg, dot, and the text. All right. Now, notice that the function right now, we get no errors. The only thing that TypeScript it's telling us is that this argument, it's of type any. That's it. That's the only thing. Now, of course, we want to make this a generic function. All right. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say that we're going to use the letter T, and then the argument is going to be t. All right. So I'm going to save it, and as soon as we do so, we get an error message. And this is because, again, the generic class is kicking in, and it's saying, dude, I know that you're going to be passing something, but I'm not sure that inside of that something that you're passing, you do get a text property. So again, it's just telling us that, you might not receive this text. So I'm not really sure that you do get this property. So what you can do, you can use an interface. I'm going to go right here at the top, and I'm going to create an interface. All right, interface, I'm going to call it whatever, scream it or scream int, whatever, it doesn't matter. The name is not important. And I'm going to say that on this one, we need to create a contract. And whenever we pass an argument, we need to make sure that the argument text is there. So I'm going to say that text is going to be a string. All right. So now, since we have an interface, we're going to say, okay, we want to use this generic class, this generic function, and we want to extend it with the interface. And now notice that the error goes away because the interface is making sure that we do get a text property. And since that passes, because we have it right here, we have the notation notated right here, it's passing and it's not giving us an error message. All right, so pretty simple. Now, of course, if I try to output the text or maybe change the text to a number, it fails because we specified that this should be a string. So again, you have a way to make an interface, make the interface communicate with the generic class, and you get more possibilities to use it right here. If I go and change it, and then I go right here at the bottom, and instead of outputting the text, I output the position. Again, we get an error because the generic class, a generic function, cannot make sure that you do get a position. For that, you get the interface, and for that, you need to add a rule on the interface. So we say position. We have a property called position, and this one, it's going to be a number because, of course, we have a number right here. Since that's going to pass, we don't get an error message. All right. So pretty useful stuff. Again, just like I told before, this is something that you might or you might not use. It's completely up to you. It's really, really useful to trim some code. But again, maybe you're not going to use it. But it's good idea. It's good idea to know that this you get this tool available. So if you want to use it.